Hi beautiful, welcome to my channel. I have been trying a ton of eyeshadow palettes here on my channel during the past few months. All of these are fall eyeshadow palette releases, and in today's video I'm going to rank them for you from worst to best. Now when I talk about ranking palettes from worst to best, keep in mind this is my own personal opinion, and I sort of kind of rank them on like my level of excitement about them. Obviously I'm going to be a lot less excited about palettes that didn't perform well for me or that I have some sort of issues with the formula, and a lot more excited about palettes that have better qualities. And then in thinking about these palettes, I drop in there how excited I am about the color story, or whether or not I'm going to get a lot of use out of these palettes, or if they're more so out of my comfort zone. So obviously all of this is my own personal opinion. If you love any of the palettes that are towards the back of the list, it just might be a palette that I'm not going to get a lot of use out of, you know? So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. If you're interested in any of the palettes I'm about to mention in today's video, I have them all listed and linked down below in the description box. If I have coupon codes for the palettes I'm going to mention, the coupon codes are also going to be down in the description box. So please check out the links down there if you're going for any of these, and whenever you use my links or my codes, you are helping out my channel. My least favorite fall palette released earned its spot because I truly dislike the formula of it. It is this palette right here from Boxum. It is called the Boxum Forever Babe palette. This was actually sent to me by Boxum, but you see that right there? That is caused by the huge amounts of fallout that this powder has. These shades are extremely softly pressed, and when you dip your brush in there, an explosion of powder kicks up at you. Was I able to create looks that I sort of kind of like with this one? I was, but just the formula is so hard to work with. It's so messy. It makes dust everywhere. It's just not an enjoyable experience, and it's also not an affordable palette. This palette retails for a high-end price, and I just don't think that the formula is up to par with a lot of other formulas on the market. I think the idea behind this color story was a good one, and it is a palette that if the formula worked, a lot of people could get a lot of use out of, but the formula was just not it. And it's weird because it shifts from color story to color story. Like if I were judging this palette on the formula of the bold quad alone, I truly didn't have too many issues with the formula of the bold palette, but some of these shimmers and some of these powders from the sexy quad and the big quad are super messy, and so that makes me not like this one at all, and I do not recommend it. I'm going to be talking about 13 palettes total, so this was number 13, and at number 12 I have this palette right here from Tarte. This is the Tarte Man Eater eyeshadow palette, which has a beautiful for fall color story. This was my first time purchasing from Tarte in years, and the reason I stopped purchasing from Tarte is because I just don't think that their formulas are up to par either with a lot of high-end formulas on the market, and I feel like this palette just sort of confirmed it for me. I saw it in store and I was bought into the hype of this palette because the color story truly is beautiful. But the most exciting shades that are part of this palette, which is like this section down here, right? Because if you cover those, it's a pretty basic looking palette, but this section right here kind of has some fun shades that you can combine with those nudes and create some fun fall eyeshadow looks. However, these matte colors do not have a good formula at all. Was it the blue or the green? Didn't even look the color it was supposed to look. It was like a muddy grayish cool toned mess. It just does not perform up to what I expected from it. The shimmers also kind of fly away when you're applying them. They don't build up the way I want them to build up. I would have to be like very careful because the formula is kind of finicky. I would have to wet my brush to make the shimmers look the color they look on the pan, and so it just requires a lot of extra work and extra attention that I just don't want to give it, because again, there's other formulas out there that are better than this one at similar price points. Also a pretty expensive palette. This was over $50, and so at full price I would not recommend it at all. If you maybe get it with like a 40% off discount, then in that case it might be worth it, but other than that I wouldn't even recommend it at like a 20 or 25% off. The packaging is cute, the color story is cute, but it just does not perform the way I want it to. Number 11 is actually a palette that I like. I feel like from number 11 onward, I pretty much like everything, but you know, I have to place them depending on my level of excitement for them. So number 11 is from Too Faced. It is this right here, the Too Faced Popcorn Balls palette. This is an 8-pan palette, and it actually surprised the heck out of me because I wasn't really expecting much from this Too Faced formula. Too Faced to me sort of kind of performs like the Tarte palette, maybe a little better, but like not that much better, and this formula is quite great. The matte shades are pigmented, they are blendable, they perform well, they blend nicely with one another. The matte shades are actually pigmented and blendable. You can build them up to your desired level of intensity, and better yet, the shimmers are actually shimmery, sparkly type shades, which was definitely a surprise because I have complained about how Too Faced shimmers don't shine for a while now, but these are pigmented and they are shiny and they actually show up beautifully on the eyelids. You can take a look right there, that looks fantastic. And so those three shimmers combined with the matte that this palette provides is actually a pretty cute color story. The reason it's kind of close to the end is because, like I said, from here onward I have a lot of palettes that I'm excited about, and this one's kind of like a smaller one that doesn't give you as many color choices. But if you're in the market for something that sort of kind of looks like this, I recommend it. If you want to gift this palette to someone you know as a Christmas present, it's like a super Christmassy palette. It's a great little gift that is going to be affordable, and it performs really well. So as I said, I was surprised by this one. I do like it and I recommend it. I actually want to continue to use it because I only got to use it once. Palette number 10 might be a surprise, and it is this one right here from Anastasia. This is the Anastasia Beverly Hills fall palette release. It is called Fall Romance, and take a look right here at what this color story looks like. I was just watching a video of Norvina on Instagram, I think it was, and she called the color story of this palette Gourmand, and I see it. I like it. It is a really beautiful, rich, pigmented palette that has some really stunning sultry shades. When I reviewed this palette, I tried to give you soft looks with it, and then I turned those looks into more sultry looks. I feel like when you see this palette, you can only think of like dark, deep looks to do with it, which is fine, but it's also kind of limiting because this might not be the palette you want to reach for every day. You can create softer looks with this one. That is the good news, by just using the lighter shades very, very sparingly. The reason this palette is kind of towards the end being a palette that I truly did like is, one, because the competition is stiff, but two, because I wish that the mattes had a bit more range to them. Like this matte Twilight here and this matte Thorns here are so close to one another. I truly wish that we had a bit more dimension within those two. Crimson and Mulberry, not the same shade at all, but also kind of in the same color story. I just wish we had a bigger range with the matte shades with this one to create more dimension with the shades that you get in this palette. I feel like if you combine Leather, Thorns, and Twilight, for example, you're going to get a very muted, one-dimensional type of look. And it's the same thing with like Ember and Mulberry, or Crimson and Midnight. I just wish that there was a bit more variety in this one. And I also wish that the shimmer shades were a little bit sparklier than they are, just because, like, why not? You guys know I love my sparkle. Other than that, it's a pretty good palette, and you can actually create some really stunning full eyeshadow looks with this one, but I'm just more excited about the palettes coming up next. The next palette is from the Odin Eye and Angelica Nyqvist collaboration, this stunning palette right here, which is the Trick or Treat palette from the collection. this was actually in my most recommended palettes for fall, especially because I feel like if you are someone who is into colorful looks and you're looking for a colorful fall palette, that is exactly what Angelica gave you with this color story. I'm obsessed with the green section of this palette, definitely my favorite, but then it also has some really nice warm orangey tones to it. It has some beautiful pops of colors, some very sparkly shimmers, which I love, and the mattes in this palette perform beautifully. I do have a discount code with Odin's Eye. The code is PATTY10. So if you want to get this palette or the next one I'll talk about in a couple of steps, that's the code for that. And I do like it, but I am more so someone who is into like the wearable shimmery looks, like kind of like the boring stuff I'm wearing right now. And so this is what I actually reach for on a daily basis. This for me is a special occasion palette and an out of my comfort zone palette, and so for that reason it doesn't rank as high as some of the other palettes you'll see coming up, but I have no complaints. It's beautiful. The next one is actually one that I reviewed super recently, like yesterday, and it is the 1111 palette from Colourpop. This right here is a palette very in my comfort zone. It's a palette that I know I can reach for on a daily basis, and it's a palette that honestly performed quite nicely. The shimmers are beautiful, not as sparkly as some of the other shimmers we'll see coming up next, but they are beautiful shimmers, and the color story is perfect for every day. This palette also only $18, which is a fantastic price range and the most affordable palette I think that I'll be talking about in today's video for sure. It kind of ranked in the middle because these mid-tone shades, like that color and this color and that color, are very, very light. They don't really build up as much as I want them to on the crease. I wish I could get a little bit more dimension with them. Like I think I put this color on yesterday and this one on top, and it was like pretty much the same thing. I couldn't even see the difference between them. This one doesn't show up that much either. And then we do have these darker colors here to build on those. But I just wanted these lighter shades to be a bit more potent than they are. For $18, it's a fantastic palette that I highly recommend. But I do have palettes coming up that overall have better formulas, more potent, more pigmented formulas. And so for that reason, this one's kind of in the middle of my ranking. In the 7th spot, I have the other Angelica Nyqvist palette with Odin's Eye. This is the Little Ghost palette, and it's the one with the cooler color story out of the two that she launched, and also the color story that I loved most. This palette ranks a little higher than the other one for some specific shades that I'll talk about in a second. And overall, it just seems like a color story that I would reach for more often than the Trick or Treat palette. First of all, my favorite shade from this palette is definitely this stunning deep burgundy color right here. I am weak for burgundies, okay? And this burgundy is truly, truly special. It is smooth. It blends like a dream. It is so pigmented. It has a beautiful, rich, purpley type base to it. Just fantastic. And to combine a deep burgundy like that one with super soft, sparkly shades like these right here is just a freaking dream. I love these shimmers. Super sparkly. They're really going to make your eyes stand out. They have amazing pigmentation. They're going to blend like a dream, and they go so well with the rest of the matte colors that this palette has. I also really loved this purpley blue matte shade right here. It is really stunning and very different. I don't think I have a color quite like that one in any of the other palettes in my collection. So these right here are my 5 favorite shades from the Little Ghost palette, and just combining the shades in here just seems fun. I've used this one a couple of times already, and I want to continue to play with it because it just is an exciting palette for me. This is colorful for me, but a colorful that I want to play with. In the 6th spot, I'm going from very colorful and fun to very basic and boring. But in the 6th spot, I have the new Patrick Ta Major Dimensions 3 eyeshadow palette. This one is Patrick Ta's first all matte palette, and it has a neutral to warm top row and a very cool toned bottom row with very pigmented, deliciously blendable and rich matte shades all the way through, including these creams right here that he included in this palette. This, like I said, a very basic monotone palette, but it's like a workhorse of a palette. It's perfect if you work in an office environment where you have to wear more serious makeup, or if you, like me, just love more natural looking makeup, or even more natural than I like, because I like this, but then I also like a lot of sparkle, and this doesn't have any sparkle, but you can also combine this beautiful matte with very sparkly shades. Honestly, I just don't have any complaints about this palette. It performs beautiful every time I use it. Great formula, great quality, and it's a palette that I see myself reaching for a lot on its own, and also to combine it with sparkly shimmer singles that I have in my collection. So just because I know that I'm going to get a lot of use out of this one, it ranks a little bit higher than some of the other palettes I've mentioned so far. This next one might surprise some of you because it is ranking quite high. It is in my top 5 for a very small palette, but I love it. I'm excited about this one. I know I'm going to get a ton of views out of it, and it's my ranking, so you can't tell me otherwise. I'm talking about this cute little tiny palette right here. This is the new Natasha Denona Mini Star palette that came out a couple of months ago. And I mean, you guys know I love Natasha Denona formulas. So obviously I love every single shade that is going to be in this palette. Natasha has creamy mattes that are pigmented, that build up beautifully, that blend into one another beautifully. And then she also makes some really stunning shimmers. In this palette she put like a regular shimmer that she does, and then she put a sparkly shimmer, which is the one that I'm obviously most excited about, this one right here, because it looks very ethereal, very natural, and it combines great with the rest of the shades that this palette has in it. So I know this is little, but I just see myself getting a ton of views out of this one, also because it's very travel friendly, so I can take it with me wherever I go, and I just see myself reaching for it a lot. Plus, I think this might be, I'm not sure if it took the spot of my favorite Natasha Denona mini palette, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely one of my top 3 at least Natasha Denona mini palettes she's ever made. It's just so wearable and so beautiful and so simple yet effective. I love a little palette that can give you at least a couple of different looks, especially if you can use those looks for a lot of different occasions, and I feel like this palette is good for anything. My 4th favorite palette I've tried as of late is this one right here from Glaminatrix Cosmetics, the Sugar and Spice palette. This one just has a little bit of everything. First of all, Glaminatrix Cosmetics makes some really spectacular glitter, shimmer, duochrome, multi-chrome shades that I love. And then besides that, in this palette, they sort of combined 2 of my favorite things when it comes to color stories. They have these beautiful neutral boring colors right here in the middle, and then the colors that they do have are pastels. I love pastel matte eyeshadow looks, especially when combined with great shimmer glitter shades, and this palette gives me all of the above. It gives me the natural, it gives me the sparkle, and it gives me the little bit of color that I do like. So what is not to love about this one? I do have a discount code with Glaminatrix Cosmetics. It's Patty10. I've heard that they're shipping, because it's from Australia, it's not always the most convenient, so you know, think about that when you're buying it. It might take a little while to get to you, I'm not sure, but their formula is fantastic. Take this beautiful shimmer, for instance. Take a look right there. I barely had to touch it, and it just has full intensity, great pigmentation. It's just a fantastic shade, and it's a multi-chrome. You see silver, I think, when I pointed at the light, but in the low light I see blue and I see purple as well, so it's a very multi-dimensional shade, and that's just one of the ones you can find in this palette. This one here and that one also multi-chromes. This one has incredible sparkles. That's another multi-chrome. The color Nutmeg is the most beautiful metallic taupey rose gold type shade. The sparkles, I just love the sparkles. Should we like add some right here. Let's just add some more to this eye look because why not? I love it. And then they're mattes, like I said, they have the boring mattes that you can combine with the fun sparkles, or they have the fun pops of pastel that also go so well with the sparkly shades. Love this one. It's a great palette, and I think one of my favorite Glaminatrix color stories, because usually their palettes are like super out there, super colorful, like intense pigmented like blues and things like that, and I'm not a huge fan of those types of colors. They scare me a little bit. Like this one, for example, I love the shades individually, but I am always overwhelmed when I want to combine them with one another. Anyways, I don't have that problem with the Sugar and Spice palette. This color story is wonderful and I love it. Actually, this is not my favorite. This is my second favorite from them, because my most favorite from them, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but my most favorite is definitely the Nearly Natural palette, because this is just basic perfection right here. Top 3. And my third most favorite palette that has launched this fall does not have a fall color story at all, but I still love it. I feel like when Pat McGrath decided to come up with this palette, she chose violence, because everyone had something to say about it. Anyways, I'm of course talking about Mothership number 11 Sunlit Seduction, which is a purely pink with a gold color story. But hear me out. These colors look great on me. It's true, they make my eyes look amazing. I love burgundies, as I mentioned earlier, and this one has one. And it also has some really stunning shimmers that Pat gave us right here. The only issue I have with this palette, or I should say, was this color here, and then I used it in an eyeshadow look and I actually really liked it, which was definitely a surprise to me. But it's like, it has like a purpley duochrome, some witchcraft, I don't know what it was, but it just looked good around my eyeballs. I don't know what to tell you. The 5 looks 1 palette I created with this one, I loved every single look. They all were flattering on me, and so I know that this is a palette that I'm not only going to love and cherish and be excited about right now because it's like new and it's Pat McGrath and I love her formulas, but it's also a palette that I'm going to love and cherish and use for a long time, because the Pat McGrath palettes in my collection are probably one of the most loved and most used palettes that I own, along with Natasha Denona palettes. And so I know that over time these palettes get a lot of use and a lot of love from me. The mattes that she shows for this one are some of my favorite matte eyeshadows she's put in her palettes, and I also love that shimmer and this purpley shimmer and this beautiful duochrome gold right here. All 3 of these shimmers are perfection. They are classy, they are sparkly, they make your eyes look super beautiful and very intense. And I know we have a lot of pinks from Pat, but I'm not letting that take away the fact that I really like this color story and that these colors look very flattering with my colored eyes and with my complexion. And so I am sticking to my guns here, and I'm putting this one as my third most favorite palette that's come out recently. Top 2 palettes, and I'm quite surprised myself that this next one is my number 2 most favorite that's come out, but the color story is just that good, and it's so perfect for fall, but also you can use it year round, and the formulas are great and the shimmers are excellent, and I just love everything about it, including the packaging. I'm talking about the Nomad Cosmetics Ghost Town USA palette. I also love the theme of this palette. Did I say that already? This palette is lovely, and even though it's pretty like Halloween themed, fall themed, it is a palette that is going to be permanent in their line. And I mean, just take a look right here at this perfect color story. We have some neutral slash maybe a little bit warm shades on this side, and then everything else has a beautiful cool toned. I love the sage green shades. I love these green shimmers. You can't go wrong with some browns to like pair these colors with. And I also really love this row of mattes right here. They're cool toned and they're different from anything else I have in my collection. I don't feel like I have a lot of colors like those right there, and they are such a beautiful contrast with the shimmers that they're kind of paired with. I look at this palette and I divide it into 3 6-pan palettes. Like, to my right there is a 6-pan palette, to my left there's a 6-pan palette, and then there's a 6-pan palette in the middle. So you can totally use these palettes that way to create eyeshadow looks if it makes things easier for you, or you can just go ham and go all over the place and combine all of the different shades. So some of my favorite colors in this palette, like I said, the sage greens, the shimmer greens as well, which have slightly different undertones. I love this color here, is beautiful, as well as that one, and then this color and that color and the silver. I love the entire palette, okay? Take a look right there at all of my favorite shades. It's a palette that is natural looking but also has some pops of color in it, but then the colors are like nice and muted and very cool toned and like not too out there. So they're colors that I feel very comfortable playing with and that are still in my comfort zone, even though they are colors. And in the past I've had some issue with Nomad Cosmetics having some inconsistencies in their formula with other palettes, but there is no inconsistency in this one at all. Every single shade is perfect, and just like that, this palette became my new favorite, my new all-time favorite Nomad Cosmetics palette, and one of my favorite palettes that's released this fall for sure. If you've been keeping track of what I've mentioned so far, you might already know what my #1 palette this fall is. And it's also not a very fall palette, but it came out during this time of year and I love it. I know that I'm going to be using this palette constantly for years and years and years. It has a perfect, wonderful, glorious, glamorous, and soft and natural but sparkly color story. And Natasha Denona really did it with this one, okay? Of course, I'm talking about the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. You guys, my basicness has no limits. This palette is wonderful. Before I forget, I have a discount code with Natasha Denona. It's PATTY15 and you can save 15% off anything on the Natasha Denona website with that code. Needless to say, I highly, highly, highly recommend this palette right here. I think this might be my all-time favorite Natasha Denona palette she's ever made. And I know it's kind of basic, but I love it because it's basic. This palette can do everything for you. First of all, I really appreciate that she included a very deep, dark, matte brown shade in this one, because you can definitely darken up any look with that color. But then also we have some beautiful peaches and we have some beautiful soft cool tone shades that combine wonderfully with metallic shimmer shades. The main thing that I love about this palette and that Natasha Denona is finally giving us, and I so greatly appreciate, is that the shimmers are finally sparkly. I can't be more thankful, okay? For the longest time, every time Natasha Denona released a mid-sized palette, I would complain that the shimmers were dull, that shimmers weren't as sparkly as I wanted them. And since the Yoka palette, which is a wonderful fall palette by the way, and her last release, she's been giving us metallic finish shimmer shades and sparklier shades in the mid-tone palettes, and I am so freaking here for it. Shades like Delia and Muse and Mia and Sheen, all of these now have the most stunning shiny finishes to them, and they actually make your eyes pop and they look incredible, and they actually make your eyes look really nice and shiny and attract the light, and they are soft and shimmery but like glamorous and just classy and beautiful. I don't know what else to say to complement this stunning palette right here, but I feel like this palette is a must-have in everyone's collection because it's just so basic that like we all need it. I know I'm going to be getting a ton of views out of this palette for years and years to come. Whenever I leave my house to go anywhere, this is most likely the palette that is coming with me, because what can't I do with this palette? Unless it's like a specific like colorful type look, I can look so beautiful and soft and glamorous, or I can do a night look with this one or an everyday look with this one, and I just I love it, okay? I love it. It is my #1 palette that's come out recently. I have no regrets about that choice, and I highly recommend it if you have not tried it yet. For reference, I did do a 5 looks 1 palette with this one, as I usually do with my Natasha Denona palette purchases. I love every single look I created. I also did 2 looks when I first reviewed it, so you have a variety of looks in my channel to see whether this palette would be worth it for you or not. If these are looks that you are into, I am definitely into them. So yeah, very excited about the I Need a Nude palette. I love it. I love that Natasha is finally giving us the shimmer shades that I have been personally asking for years, okay? If you guys like this video and you found it helpful, let me know by giving it a thumbs up before you leave. And please let me know what your favorite palette release this fall has been down in the comment section. If you're new to my channel, please don't leave without subscribing. If you want to get any of these, definitely check out the links and the discount codes in the description box. I love you all so much. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back in the next video. Bye.